in the pre-dawn hours of December 16th, 1944. The quiet of the Ardennes forest shattered. At exactly 5:30 a.m., German artillery unleashed a thunderous barrage along an 85-mile stretch of the Allied front in Belgium and Luxembourg. It marked the beginning of what would become the largest and bloodiest single battle fought by U.S. troops in World War II, the Battle of the Bulge. As 1944 drew to a close, Germany found itself in a deteriorating position. The Allies had liberated Paris, and Soviet forces were closing in from the east. But Hitler, ever the gambler, saw one last chance to change the tide. His plan, codenamed Operation Wacht am Rhein or Watch on the Rhine, was audacious. Launch a surprise attack through the Ardennes to divide the Allied lines, encircle and destroy 4 Allied armies, and capture the vital port of Antwerp. He believed that if successful, it might force the Western Allies into negotiating a peace, allowing Germany to refocus on the Eastern Front. To achieve this, Hitler assembled over 200,000 German troops, nearly 1,000 tanks and assault guns, and significant artillery and air support. Many of these units, such as the 1st SS Panzer Division, had been reconstituted with veterans, elite paratroopers, and SS troops. The Ardennes region had been chosen deliberately. Sparsely populated and heavily forested, it was considered an unlikely site for a major German offensive, especially in winter. Allied intelligence believed the Germans lacked the capacity for a significant attack. As a result, the area was lightly defended, mostly by inexperienced or exhausted American units, such as the 106th Infantry Division, newly arrived and untested in battle. The terrain, poor weather, and overconfidence lulled Allied leadership into complacency. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery assumed the Germans were incapable of offensive action. This strategic misjudgment would cost them dearly in the opening days. The initial German assault struck with stunning speed and effectiveness. Waves of panzer divisions and mechanized infantry tore into the American lines. Roads were jammed with tanks, trucks, and soldiers as the Wehrmacht forced its way westward, creating a literal and metaphorical bulge in the Allied front. Hence the battle's nickname. In places like Losheim Gap and the Schnee Eifel, German forces encircled and captured entire American regiments. The 106th Infantry Division lost more than 6,000 men in just 2 days. The surprise and ferocity of the attack sent shockwaves through Allied command. Adding to the confusion was the deployment of Operation Greif, a covert unit led by Otto Skorzeny. German commandos wearing captured U.S. uniforms and using American equipment infiltrated Allied lines, spreading disinformation, changing road signs, and creating paranoia. General Omar Bradley, commander of the U.S. 12th Army Group, even ordered additional security for Eisenhower amid fears of an assassination attempt. The opening days of the offensive were especially brutal for Belgian and Luxembourgish civilians. Many were caught in the crossfire or forced to flee their homes. Entire towns, such as St. Vith, came under intense bombardment. Some civilians aided retreating American units, providing shelter or intelligence about German movements. Though stunned, the Allies did not collapse. Units such as the 28th Infantry Division and the 9th Armored Division staged fighting retreats, slowing the German advance. Heroic stands at crossroads and bridges delayed key columns, forcing German forces to burn precious fuel. By December 19th, General Eisenhower had begun to grasp the scope of the offensive. He convened a crisis meeting in Verdun. There, General George S. Patton famously committed to pivoting his entire Third Army northward to relieve the town of Bastogne, an action that would become critical in the coming days. By December 20th, 1944, German forces had punched deep into the Allied lines. A massive, jagged protrusion, the Bulge, was now clearly visible on Allied maps. Towns like Clairvaux, Wiltz, and St. Vith had fallen. Yet the Germans were not achieving their timetable. Resistance was stiffening, and supply lines were faltering. At the heart of this strategic contest was a small Belgian town that soon became a symbol of American resolve. Bastogne. Strategically located at a hub of 7 vital roads, Bastogne was essential to German plans. Control of the town would allow the Wehrmacht to funnel tanks and reinforcements rapidly toward the Meuse River and Antwerp beyond. Recognizing its importance, German commanders, including Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt and General Hasso von Manteuffel, rushed panzer divisions to surround and capture Bastogne. But the Allies were equally quick to recognize Bastogne's significance. On December 19th, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower ordered the 101st Airborne Division, under Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, to move in and hold the town at all costs. Alongside elements of the 10th Armored Division and other support units, they quickly dug in. By December 21st, Bastogne was completely surrounded. German forces blocked all roads, in and out. American units, vastly outnumbered and short on ammunition, food, and medical supplies, faced relentless attacks from tanks, artillery, and infantry. On December 22nd, a German delegation approached the American lines with a surrender demand. The Germans, confident in their encirclement, offered to spare the defenders if they capitulated. General McAuliffe's famous reply was characteristically brief and defiant: "Nuts." Delivered to the Germans with no further explanation, the reply confused them, but rallied American morale. McAuliffe clarified to his officers, "That means go to hell." The message resonated across the front. Bastogne would not yield. The days following the encirclement were defined by freezing cold, thick fog, and bitter fighting. Soldiers endured temperatures below zero with inadequate winter gear. Frostbite became as common as bullet wounds. Despite these hardships, the defenders held on, repelling wave after wave of German assaults. The civilian population suffered as well. Many huddled in cellars, without food or heat. Bastogne's medieval buildings were battered by shellfire, and hospitals overflowed with wounded. Still, the resolve of the defenders remained firm. The Germans had hoped the dense fog and overcast skies would keep Allied air power grounded, and for several days it did. But on December 23rd, the weather cleared. Suddenly, Allied aircraft filled the skies. C-47s dropped much-needed supplies to the 101st Airborne. Fighters and bombers strafed German armor and convoys with devastating effect. The air superiority the Allies had long relied on was back. American morale soared, while German momentum began to slow. Their fuel supply, already precarious, was dwindling rapidly. Allied planes targeted tank columns and bridges, further straining the Wehrmacht's ability to advance. Even before Bastogne was fully surrounded, General George S. Patton was already preparing a response. At a December 19th meeting in Verdun, he boldly claimed that he could pivot 3 divisions of his Third Army northward and launch a counterattack in 48 hours, a feat many believed impossible. But Patton delivered. In an extraordinary logistical maneuver, American units marched over 100 miles in bitter cold, arriving just in time. On December 26th, elements of the 4th Armored Division broke through German lines and entered Bastogne. American troops greeted them with cheers. The siege had been lifted. Though fighting around the town would continue, the German momentum was broken. The events of December 20-26 marked the high watermark of the German offensive. Though the battle was far from over, Bastogne had become a symbol of American tenacity and a psychological blow to German hopes. The Germans had gambled on a swift surprise campaign and lost the element of shock. As reinforcements poured in, the Allies began to stabilize the front and prepare for a counteroffensive. The tide of battle had turned. With Patton's Third Army breaking the siege of Bastogne on December 26th, the momentum of Hitler's last great offensive began to falter. But the fight was far from over. The opening of the Allied counteroffensive was brutal, bloody, and punishing. Driven by the need to regain lost ground and destroy Germany's offensive power once and for all. By December 27th, Bastogne was no longer surrounded, but it was still under near-constant German pressure. The 101st Airborne Division, exhausted and frostbitten, continued to fight off probing attacks and artillery barrages. Roads leading to the town remained contested. As reinforcements arrived, Allied High Command, under General Eisenhower and Field Marshal Montgomery, began planning a two-pronged squeeze. Patton's Third Army would press north, while U.S. First and British forces under Montgomery would attack from the north and west. Despite freezing temperatures and deep snow, Allied forces launched aggressive attacks. The battered American units were joined by fresh divisions arriving from France, including the 11th Armored Division and the 17th Airborne, newly deployed to the Ardennes. By late December, the German offensive was clearly losing steam. The rapid advance of their armored spearheads had outpaced logistical support. Fuel shortages became critical. German tanks were abandoned or destroyed simply because they ran out of gas. The capture of St. Vith, a key transportation hub, on December 23rd had provided the Germans a brief success. But by the 28th, Allied counterattacks retook much of the surrounding terrain, and reinforcements from the east were halted by logistical gridlock and growing Allied resistance. Additionally, weather conditions continued to improve, allowing Allied air forces to strike German convoys and rear supply depots. P-47 Thunderbolts and B-26 Marauders strafed roads clogged with trucks and tanks, while paratroopers in the north cut off German retreat routes. Strategically, this period saw growing friction among Allied leadership. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, commanding British forces in the north, was criticized for being slow to counterattack. His controversial public statements on January 7th, praising British command while downplaying American contributions, caused a rift, particularly with generals like Patton and Bradley. Still, Eisenhower's ability to hold the coalition together ensured a unified Allied front. At this critical juncture, cooperation remained more important than egos. As the Allies pressed in, German forces fought back with remarkable tenacity. In places like Mannheim, Hotten, and Houffalize, combat became house to house, often at night, in bitter cold. Frozen ground made foxholes difficult to dig. Soldiers used dynamite to break the earth. The 12th SS Panzer Division, infamous for its role in the Malmedy massacre, counterattacked near La Glaise, trying to hold the northern shoulder, but their armored units were cut off and systematically destroyed. American GIs fought not only the enemy, but the elements. Veterans recalled ice forming on rifles, rations frozen solid, and trench foot setting in. Despite these hardships, morale remained high, especially after the lifting of Bastogne. As American troops pushed back into towns held by the Germans, the civilian toll became more apparent. Villages were reduced to rubble, and civilians emerged from basements dazed, hungry, and cold. Word of Nazi atrocities, including the massacre at Malmedy, December 17th, where 84 American prisoners were executed by SS troops, began to spread widely. These war crimes deepened American resolve and reminded Allied troops of the stakes in this fight. By January 3, 1945, German troops had been forced into a tight, shrinking salient. Hitler ordered continued attacks, hoping to delay Allied advances and regroup his forces. But the Wehrmacht no longer had the men, fuel, or equipment to sustain the fight. The bulge in the line was beginning to collapse, squeezed on all sides by American and British forces. Hitler's last gamble in the West was unraveling. By the first week of January 1945, Hitler's Ardennes offensive was rapidly disintegrating. What had begun on December 16th as a powerful surprise strike through the Ardennes forest was now turning into a desperate fight for survival. The German High Command knew it, so did the Allies. Now the final act was underway. The Allied strategy in early January was clear: pinch off and destroy the German salient created by the offensive. Coordinated attacks from both north and south applied increasing pressure on the German flanks. By January 8th, German forces had begun withdrawing from the northern tip of the Bulge near the Meuse River, recognizing that the advance on Antwerp was no longer feasible. U.S. First and Third Armies, under Generals Courtney Hodges and George Patton, relentlessly pushed eastward. Despite heavy snow and treacherous roads, towns like March, Foy, and Houffalize were recaptured. The crossroads town of Houffalize was particularly important. It was the intended link-up point for Patton's and Montgomery's forces. It was taken on January 16th, a symbolic moment marking the practical closing of the Bulge. On that same day, American patrols from both the north and south linked up. reuniting front lines that had been severed for over a month. The German salient, once nearly 50 miles deep, was now being crushed in a vice. Realizing the offensive had failed, Hitler authorized a general withdrawal on January 7th, but with orders to fight delaying actions wherever possible. This led to savage rearguard fighting, especially in rugged terrain around St. Vith and the Aar River. Many German units had to abandon heavy equipment due to lack of fuel. Wehrmacht commanders, such as General Hasso von Manteuffel, skillfully organized retreats, but by mid-January, the effort was focused entirely on extracting surviving troops, not holding territory. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the overall German commander in the West, later admitted the operation had been a colossal strategic failure. "We gambled everything and lost." While the Germans were on the retreat, Allied progress was costly. Fierce winter conditions continued to take their toll, with temperatures often dropping below -10 degrees Fahrenheit or -23 degrees Celsius. Frostbite, hypothermia, and trench foot plagued Allied units. Entire regiments were rotated not because of combat losses, but due to exposure, casualties mounted on both sides. By the end of January, the US had suffered over 89,000 casualties, including more than 19,000 killed, 47,000 wounded, and 23,000 missing or captured, making it the costliest battle ever fought by American forces. German losses were even higher, estimated between 80,000 and 100,000, including thousands of irreplaceable veteran soldiers and tanks. Belgian and Luxembourgish civilians also paid a high price. Tens of thousands displaced, entire towns destroyed, and many killed by bombing, shellfire, or summary execution. Though tactically the Germans had advanced significantly in December, the Battle of the Bulge was a strategic catastrophe for the Third Reich. Hitler had depleted much of his remaining armored strength, gambled away elite SS units, and failed to delay the Allied advance in any meaningful long-term way. Most significantly, Germany could no longer launch a major offensive in the West. After the battle, the German military would remain on the defensive until its final collapse in May 1945. For the Allies, the victory at the Bulge demonstrated the resilience and adaptability of the American army. Units that had been overwhelmed and encircled in December were now victorious in January. The battle also proved the importance of logistics, weather, air superiority, and cohesive command, elements that would be essential in the final push into Germany. In the decades following the war, the Battle of the Bulge became emblematic of American courage and sacrifice. The Siege of Bastogne, in particular, became a symbol of defiance and grit, with General McAuliffe's "nuts" reply entering the annals of military legend. Today, memorials stand in places like Bastogne, Malmedy, and Clairvaux to honor the fallen. The legacy of those bitter weeks in the winter of 1944-45 remains a powerful reminder of the cost of freedom and the endurance of those who fight to preserve it. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like this video and smash the bell. Have a wonderful day, everyone.